Right. So, the private sector, free enterprise is essentially the ultimate source of all money. That's how wealth is created. And that that system is alive and well in the United States, increasingly so as we sort of deregulate, take some of the unnecessary restraints off of people. I have a whole book called The Death of Common Sense, which is about laws that restrain thought and require robotic obedience to certain rules without any reason or rhyme to them. But in spite of things like that, I think the United States is undergoing an expansion in its economic base now. Things seem to be going well in terms of science and technology in general, and the business climate in general. And I think that the problem with my field, cryobiology, especially organ banking, has been that you can't attract money to fund things that are not going to pay off for a very long period of time. It's very hard to do that. So I'm unique in having been able to do that, but it's only because there have been some angel funders that see things the way I do and understand the necessity of a very long-term horizon on these problems, because they're just too difficult to solve with a few people working on them. They're very difficult. But now I think things are changing because we are, I think, on the brink of success. We're on the threshold of success. And if you lay out, the economic arguments for organ banking, they're quite vast and quite compelling. So I think if you believe that it can work and will generate trillions of dollars of revenue, then it's really worth some investment. But you have to be convinced that it can work. Otherwise, you could invest in, universal, perpetual motion or something like that. And it may be a great idea if it worked, but if it's never going to work, it's not a good investment. So I think that what has been changing is that sort of simultaneously, and it's not entirely coincidental, but it's partly coincidental, interest in organ banking, developing since about 2013 or so, has been developing because of the potential that it would have, but that's been developing along with real advances in the field, really true advances in the field, like I have made, like people in other laboratories have made. And just a few years ago, you couldn't preserve a rat liver, for 3 days. You could preserve it for maybe 1 day. Well, then people came along at Harvard that showed, oh, geez, through this very complicated procedure, I can supercool a rat liver for 3 days, even sometimes for 4 days. So that's an actual accomplishment, right? So, in the early 1980s or mid 1980s, a real big breakthrough took place in kidney preservation. They developed something called UW solution or Biospan, and you could flush a kidney with that and store it and transplant it after much longer storage periods than you could do before, and that kidney would do great. And that led to a big revolution in organ use. So with longer liver preservation times as well, which could be preserved with the same solution, the number of wasted livers fell by about 50%, because now that liver could make it long enough to get in the recipient. But the problem was that then, after that wonderful breakthrough and everything, nothing happened for about 30 years. There wasn't ever any solution better than UW solution. So you start losing your momentum, you start losing your excitement, you start losing the potential for investment in organ preservation, because it just looks like you spent a god-awful amount of money, on research grants or whatever, and gotten yourself really nowhere. So that's not really very encouraging. But now, again, I think things are starting to change. Now you can preserve that liver for 3 days. Now you can do some other interesting things like freeze sheep ovaries and have all of them survive after transplantation, even if you use techniques which have room for improvement. Now you can take a rabbit kidney and you can put it down at minus 130 degrees and warm it back up and transplant it. And even though you've only done it one time, it supported the life of the rabbit, gosh darn it. And so we now know that these things can be done. And now it looks like they can be done in style. So I think that we can now make a case for people who are interested in the commercial aspects of cryobiology to start taking the field a lot more seriously. And there have been successful businesses in cryobiology in the past. There are tissue banks all over the place. There are skin banks. There are sperm banks. Uh, Effectively, there are kind of quasi egg banks. And I think that eventually we can move that into organs. Uh, People made a lot of money just banking heart valves. Somebody published a method in the literature about their success at freezing heart valves, but nobody was using it clinically. So somebody read the paper, implemented clinically, and made tens of millions of dollars off of that for decades. So there are success stories in the field in the past. And I think that uh, the thing that's maybe changing now is that we may be able to look at greater success stories. Yes, it's big business to be able to preserve heart valves and sperm, but how much bigger business would it be to be able to bank whole organs or limbs or faces or things like that? I mean, the possibilities become transformational. They become completely game changing in nature. And the economic implications are just overwhelming. So if you could do things like prevent organs from being rejected, uh, prevent people from dying of organ failure when they normally would, those are big things that change the way that we live, and they change uh, big facets of the economy. So I do think that there's a case to be made. I think that private sector investment, ultimately being the source of all money, is the way to go. But in the short run, there's increased interest on the part of government agencies. The Organ Preservation Alliance has done a great deal of positive work in liberating research money, which again uh, is a great thing to do because the government can afford to invest in things that don't pay off. I mean, they don't like it, but they're not going to go bankrupt if they waste their money, you might say. So that leads to the seed data that comes out that eventually finds a way to make a buck and to get into the clinic and actually uh, allow this to be of benefit to ordinary human beings.